everyone, my name is Habayeb and I am talking from my room today because I tested positive for COVID. I am supposed to be a local speaker, yet here we are. I think that is totally in line with this year's theme for TEDx, which is changing currents, looking at all of these changes that are happening around us and how us as humans have been so adaptive and resilient to these changes and how we do that. Today, I want to talk to you about why we can never stay happy, but also we can never stay sad. We seem to fluctuate between the two all the time. And why do we do that? I want you to think about a time where you were in trouble and you were extremely upset or anxious or sad, and you thought, oh God, I can't find a solution to this situation, feeling like you're going to stay like this forever. You're going to stay in this situation forever and feeling that you're going to be sad or depressed forever. And I want you to think about times where you were extremely happy, you were falling in love, or you got a new job, a new promotion, and you felt like this level of happiness that you're in, again, is going to last forever. We all know from experience that that's not true. The happiness doesn't last forever. And the sadness also doesn't last forever. It seems that we always return to a certain neutral state or a basic level of happiness. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. It's a concept called the hedonic treadmill, looking at how humans, all of us, go through levels of highs where we're extremely happy with something that's happening in our lives. We return to a basic level of happiness, and oftentimes we go down into a state of depression or sadness. And again, though, we return to a basic level of happiness. And the interesting thing about this phenomenon or concept is that we all return to different levels of happiness. So my basic level of happiness can be very different than my friend's basic level of happiness. We all differ in these things. The basic or foundational level of happiness can change from person to person, but for the individual, for the individual themselves, it stays oftentimes the same for their entire life. They need to put a lot of effort into changing that level of happiness. And that's why you'll find people that are just happy people their whole life. And some people are at a lower level of happiness, again, for their whole life. The set point of happiness is determined 40% by genetics, which is why it's quite difficult to change. It's a significant part of your happiness, whereas 60% is in our control. And that's what I want to talk about today, the things that are in our control. So why, first of all, do we go through these fluctuations? It's a process of sensitization and desensitization. So for example, when something new happens in your life, you fall in love, you are sensitized to the situation, you're focusing on it, your senses are like, ooh, this is something new. So you're excited and happy. But over time, you stop feeling that way because what was once new is now normal. So you've become desensitized. In situations of extreme poverty, of losing your job, you're shocked by the poverty or you're shocked by war. But over time, you become desensitized because it becomes a normal thing in your life that you've gotten used to. You're no longer shocked by it. And that's why tourists, for example, when they go to countries that are extremely impoverished, they get extremely upset. And they stay like that for a while. Again, even they get desensitized. But when they go in, they realize that the people living in the situation are oftentimes continuing with their life as if, not very much has changed for them or not very much is happening. They have birthdays and they have family reunions and they celebrate things despite being in an extreme state of poverty. That is, they have become desensitized to the situation. And that is the process of the hedonic treadmill, that you will be extremely sad at some point, but over time you become desensitized. And that's why you go back to a certain base level of happiness or your happiness set point. I talked once to a recruiter, and she referred to the hedonic treadmill without actually referring to the hedonic treadmill. Essentially, what she was telling me was when she's hiring someone, even though she has a certain budget for that individual, she tries really hard not to reach the absolute maximum she can offer that person. And the reason that she does that, even though she knows that would make them super happy, is that if she can make them super happy with a lower budget, it's better for her because in her experience, over time, after 6 months or a year, the person inevitably becomes less happy with the offer that they were originally excited with, and they want more. They want a promotion, they want a higher salary, and she wants to leave room in her budget to be able to do that for them after a year, because otherwise, she has a really hard time retaining those employees. Again, despite the fact that they were super excited about the offer when they got it. And so even though she didn't know it was called the hedonic treadmill, that is the phenomenon that is occurring there. I want to talk now about how do we increase our happiness set point, because that is the whole point of this talk. How do we make ourselves just generally happier, even in our neutral state? There are 3 aspects that we have control over that we can put effort into in order to increase our overall happiness. The first concept, and the most important one, is participating in acts of kindness or altruistic acts where we do something nice to the people around us, or for the people around us. We help them out, we help out our community, our family. And there are a couple of reasons that this is one of the main ways of increasing our general level of happiness. The number one reason is that we remove the focus from our own lives, what's happening with us, to what's happening with the people around us, because everyone is going through something, right? And then in addition to that, interacting with the community over and over again, it increases levels of connectedness, which is increasing your oxytocin levels. It's a hormone that makes you feel connected to people. It makes you feel loved and valued. And just by default, the fact that you're doing something kind for someone or you're helping someone else out makes you feel like you are a valuable member of society, like your life matters, and that inevitably increases your happiness set point. Now, the second way of increasing your happiness set point is by looking at your locus of control. Now, what does that mean? It means that, for example, if I have an internal locus of control, it means that I hold myself accountable when negative things happen and when positive things happen. So basically, if I had an exam, for example, and I didn't do well, I hold myself accountable. I say, you know what, maybe I didn't study enough. Last time I didn't study enough, so next time I should study more. I should go to the professor's office hours. That's an internal locus of control. People with internal locuses of control are just generally happier than those that have external locuses of control. So now, what is an external locus of control? I think you could probably figure it out, but it is essentially someone who blames other people, external factors, for positive and negative things that happen in their lives. So again, back to the exam. If that person did the exam and didn't do well, what they would do is say, well, the exam wasn't written properly. It was confusing. The professor didn't do a good job explaining this concept in class. They're not taking any accountability for what they contributed to that situation. And you can see why this can affect someone's overall level of happiness over time. And usually it's because someone with an external locus of control isn't going to take the necessary actions in order to fix this problem next time. So they will continually put themselves in these negative, not self-serving situations. The third concept is that neuroticism, your level of neuroticism, also impacts your happiness set point, the set point that you return to. Now, there are 5 big personality traits, and you can go online and look them up. There's, your extroversion, your neuroticism, and a whole bunch of other things. And so what you can do online is do a test to see where you lie on the level of neuroticism, because out of the 5 personality traits, it's the one that determines your happiness set point. And so what is neuroticism? It's essentially someone's ability to deal with stress, deal with negative situations. Usually people who are neurotic, they think that the smallest thing is insolvable. it gives them extreme anxiety. They overthink the situation. They don't know what to do with it. They're very risk averse, and they don't have the ability to kind of get out of that situation of stress very easily. Even if it's a minor level of stress, they're very anxious people. Now, neuroticism in the past was it was a very useful thing to have. Being neurotic meant that you were going to live longer, you were going to do better in life, because at that time, there was a lot of life or death situations. We were hunter-gatherers, we were living with animals, we were living in the middle of nowhere. We didn't have massive communities or systems of safety that would make us feel like we were in control. So being a little bit more neurotic gave you an edge because you were really focusing on all the things that can go wrong and fixing it before it happens. Over time, as we became industrialized societies, we were definitely in a lot safer communities than we were in before. Neuroticism became a bit maladaptive. And so now people who maintain that neuroticism aren't doing as well. Most people have reduced the level of neuroticism because it's not necessary anymore. We don't need to be at that level of hyper-awareness. The individuals that maintain that level of neuroticism typically have veered away from this idea of spirituality. And so they have what is called death anxiety. So essentially what this means is that in order to reduce the levels of neuroticism, we need to believe that this life isn't all there is. This material world isn't everything. There's something beyond this. There's a sense of almost immortality, because after this life, there's a whole other thing that's going to be happening, right? Whereas people that are high in neuroticism, they found that sometimes they have a feeling that, well, you know what, spirituality is not a thing, afterlife is not a thing, so this world is what matters, and it increases the ante, right? Because now you're hyper focused on the material aspects of this world, which don't always work out, right? It's always shifting and changing. And so they feel like, well, I'm going to die, and if this is all that matters, I need to get it right. And it puts a lot of focus and makes them highly neurotic. So the solution here is to try and participate in things that make you feel like this life isn't everything, and there are other aspects, other things that are of higher importance, and just getting in touch essentially with your spirituality will make you feel that way. Now, those are 3 ways to increase your happiness set point. How can we use those strategies as a couple? So when you get married or when you fall in love, you are at an extremely high level of happiness. But over time, you live with your partner and you become desensitized to the things that made you so excited about them. How do we take these strategies and make sure that we can create sustainable, happy relationships and we don't get bored? Because oftentimes you do hear people say, I am bored with my spouse. We've been together for years. They are boring. I don't really like them anymore. I don't want to hang out with them. I find that it's just super banal. And sometimes they say, I'm not even really that attracted to them anymore. Why is that? It's the same individual oftentimes, right? They haven't changed that much. But it isn't that they've changed or not changed. It's oftentimes that we've just become desensitized and we've returned to a set level of happiness, which isn't so much a problem if we're aware of that. But the question is, how can we increase that set level of happiness as a couple so that we stay interested and we have these sustainable long-term relationships? So the first strategy of participating in acts of kindness. I think as individuals, if each individual on their own participates in acts of kindness, that will increase their happiness set point individually, which will still be good for the relationship. But now, imagine that you did these acts together, especially if you do something kind together that you couldn't do on your own. This would condition your mind to associate this partnership with this higher value of being able to participate in these acts of kindness that naturally bring up your happiness set point. Number 2, your locus of control. Now, in a relationship, you'll find that sometimes people will take accountability for the things that they're doing wrong in the relationship. Perhaps they have communication issues. Perhaps they have baggage from their past, and they're able to decipher through those issues to see how it is contributing to the negative aspects in the relationship. And in some relationships, you'll find that no, they have an external locus of control where they're not looking internally, they're looking at their partner. My partner does this. My partner doesn't do this. My partner isn't listening to me. And they're not taking into account the aspects of themselves that are contributing to that. Of course, those with internal locuses of control that are able to hold themselves accountable generally have better relationships because they are able to change the aspects of themselves that they have control over in order to bring on more positive outcomes in the relationship. Now, the third thing is the level of neuroticism of one or both of the partners. If you can reduce the level of neuroticism in the partnership, then you will have more long-term happiness and increase that happiness set point. And you can do that by participating in acts of spirituality and really talking to each other and focusing on the higher level aspects of this life and not just the material gains and successes that you're having on a day-to-day basis. What is the meaning of this life? Where are we going after this life? What can we do that will improve our status after this life is over? Because not everything is about the material aspects of this really finite period of time that we live on Earth. Doing these things as a couple can definitely increase the happiness set point of that couple. And also, in my opinion, if we're looking at the hedonic treadmill and we're seeing that we have waves, and we're always going to have waves no matter what the happiness set point is, my question is, as a couple, how can we increase those higher frequencies, the higher points of happiness? And the way, and research has shown that the way couples can do that is by participating in new activities, right? Remember when we were saying we are sensitive to new things happening in our lives? We can create these experiences on purpose with our partners. So participating in new, exciting activities together will make us experience these higher level of happiness and associate that high point with that partner because we're conditioning ourselves, those emotions, to be connected with our partner and the memory of our partner. So those are the number one ways to not only increase your happiness set point, but also increase those high points. That is all I think I have time for today. I hope this really helps you guys understand happiness, understand how you can increase your level of happiness and have great long-term relationships, have better health in your life, better well-being, because that is what happiness does to you. And I really hope that you guys have a fantastic year, no matter what changes you're facing and no matter what changes you're going to face, to know that not everything is permanent. This is all very temporary and we always return to a basic level of happiness. And if we can just increase that, even better. Have a great year, guys.